MHT and the Times-Union for inviting me to this debate. I'd also like to thank our supporters, my family, and especially my wife, Katie. Many of you are probably asking, who is Eric Sundwall and why is he seeking this office? Well, aside from being the Libertarian Party chairman in New York State, I'm a Columbia County business person. I'm a father and a husband. And I'd like to think that I'm a keeper of the time-honored tradition in America called liberty. 2 months ago, I never expected to be sitting in this position and running for this office. I sought this office in 2006 and was rudely knocked off the ballot by a competitor who didn't feel that there should be a competitor in the political marketplace. Last month, the Libertarian Party of New York and myself obtained over close to 7,000 signatures, and we're happy to be on the ballot, and we're happy to be here and look forward to our engagement tonight.
Thank you very much. I think disagrees with you vehemently. As a libertarian, you're against this kind of government intervention.
I am. I think that the big increase for the middle class in this case is going to be the inflation involved with the money that's being pumped into the economy. And what we need to look at is not the outrage of what we're experiencing with the executive compensation based on contracts and provisions in the package, but the outrage of the entire bailout of AIG.
Okay, so let me just see if I have this straight. It suggests to me when you say that we shouldn't have government intervention, which is what you're saying.
In this particular case, in the stimulus package, yes.
That you would have allowed AIG and other large financial institutions to collapse if that was the way they were going, which also suggests that you would ask the American people to face the consequences of a breakdown in the credit market.
That certainly would be the case, and we have to deal with that issue on a long-term basis. And quite frankly, the way we do our money supply and the way that the Federal Reserve deals with our currency is a big problem. And unfortunately, I think by just kind of putting a Band-Aid on this particular problem, we're just extending that bubble. And when that bubble gets extended, it's going to just basically, it's going to affect our next 2 or 3 generations.
In theory, I think that there are probably a lot of people who may agree, but aren't there psychological factors at work in the market as well as economic factors? And if a group of people don't have confidence in the long-term viability of the U.S. government, for example, nobody's going to be investing in U.S. companies.
And that's the problem. I mean, that was the promise that the Nixon administration made when they took us off the gold standard in the early 70s, and the promise was that the currency was going to be the world's trading currency. And what's happening is that that's becoming, that's abused, and it's failing. And as much as this is really a Band-Aid, we have to look at over longer structural term items here, and it may be, you know, markets fail, and that's a consequence. But when we go and we bail them out, I think we're doing even more damage.
Did you want to say anything to each other about this? It seemed as the right idea at the time, but once further healthy institutions were going to go down the tubes, that's when the government started.
You know, I'm a Main Street businessman, and nobody seems to care too much about whether or not I fail or I'm successful. I think the people in my community do, but if I fail in my business, I don't have the expectation that somebody should come and bail me out.
But clearly, day-to-day small businesses and day-to-day operations, student loans, things like that are all predicated upon
stability,
readily available credit, the kind that is propped up by these large institutions in our system.
They are, and unfortunately what's happened is we have a culture of credit that's distorting the market severely. And that has to do with fractional banking. And until we address those types of issues, all the credit in the world is going to be meaningless until we actually address that issue.
I just want to say something that
let's turn our attention to healthcare. How can the healthcare system be restructured to expand to include many of those who are currently left out of the safety net or simply priced out of the market?
How can it expand?
Yeah. In other words, how can the protections that are enjoyed by many members of our society be expanded to the maximum number of people in America?
I suppose you could just create legislation that said as much. I can't say that I would agree with that, however. I think that what's happened over the course of the years is that we have a distortion in the marketplace for health care, and that originated with the HMO Act in the early 1970s that required employers with over 25 employees to provide a health care plan. And really, you know, as a libertarian, it's not my expectation that I should necessarily make sure that you floss your teeth or that you have these health habits in place. Certainly, when we talk about people in dire medical needs, that's a different issue. But when we ask everybody to support everybody else for their health care, I think we're going to create a large system that is going to be inefficient, that's going to have fraud and waste in it, and it doesn't do anybody any good.
But doesn't that fly in the face of most people's experience? Most people call out for the kind of protection that the most wealthy portion of our society now enjoys. Good health insurance, certainly affordable health insurance, is something that all Americans are clamoring for.
Well, we all need food and shelter, too. And, I guess we have to ask ourselves, are we distorting what is necessarily what we call public goods theory by expanding everything as a right instead of what, in effect, is an entitlement?
Well, but increasingly, isn't public policy viewing affordable health care as a right, as one of the guarantees that the Declaration of Independence promises for life,
The Democrats and the Republicans
liberty,
have been
and the
doing that
pursuit of
for
happiness?
years, and I can assure you that that would not happen if the Libertarians were in office. But unfortunately, that's not the case.
So how would you respond to somebody who is sitting here who had that point of view, that health care is a right?
I would respond that, rights that we've traditionally known and that have been provided for us in the Constitution have more about protecting us from a lot of the other things. And to say that health care is a right, I just don't understand why that would be the case or how somebody can actually make that argument.
We're going to turn it over to with the president's plan to draw down combat forces in Iraq and concentrate on Afghanistan?
It's a start, but I don't necessarily agree that transferring the troops to Afghanistan is going to produce anything meaningful. Unfortunately, Afghanistan is a failed state. I questioned our purpose there to begin with. One of the problems I had with both the Iraqi and the Afghanistan conflicts was the fact that Congress abrogated their responsibility to declare war. And they basically wrote a blank check for the president to go in and get involved in that. Now, my father served in Vietnam, my grandfather served in Korea, and my brother served in the first Iraq intervention, if you will, and all of those guys did their duty. And unfortunately, Congress has not been doing their duty, and I think we have a big problem about preemptive, aggressive foreign policies that allow us to enter into these countries and basically create the mess that occurs here. I think it's good to draw down in Iraq, and it will be a good policy to pursue if that's the case. I'm skeptical that we will actually pull out of there in any meaningfully short amount of time. And I don't think the escalation in Afghanistan is necessary, and I would support a withdrawal from there.
An immediate withdrawal from Afghanistan?
I would.
There are those who say, that would almost assuredly promote the return of authoritarian theocracy and allow the spread of terrorism.
It's very possible. I think those factors are going to be in play regardless of whatever our status is in the country.
So the U.S. would have no impact on that at all, in your opinion?
No impact on the level of terrorism that could, I'm with Ron Paul. I think a lot of it turns into blowback. And I think that when we go into these countries and we try to stabilize them, we're not necessarily wanted there. The world's a mean, nasty place. And sometimes you have to take back and take stock.
Do you guys want to say anything to each other about this issue?
Go ahead, Scott.
No, I think we just have a different opinion about it, but I understand
Yeah, certainly. I mean, if Scott gets elected, he's going to be closer to power than I would be if I were elected. So, you know, he's got to work in the parameters of the Democratic Party. Not to say he's not an independent voice in his own right, but I don't think I would be bound by the policies that are going to be coming from the White House, let's put it that way.
So you would be more of a, who would be somebody who you admire who's in Congress right now?
Oh, of course, Ron Paul, right? I'm a big Dennis Kucinich fan, though, too. I think Dennis is on the right track with a lot of different issues, and I think I'd find a lot of common ground with him, too.
We have